You know, that feeling when you suddenly realize you're not really in control anymore, that you have to completely rely on other people.
Oh, definitely. That feeling where your usual sense of command just evaporates.
Exactly. And that feeling that really basic human need to manage our own lives might actually help us understand what we're diving into today. Nosocomephobia.
Yeah, that idea of losing agency is, I think, central here. Nosocomophobia isn't just like being a bit nervous about hospitals. Our sources define it as a real phobia.
Oh, phobia. So more intense than usual anxiety.
Right, a powerful, maybe even irrational fear that's quite distinct from the normal apprehension anyone might feel going into a hospital.
A rational fear of hospitals. That sounds
Um,
pretty serious. And the word itself, nosocomophobia, apparently tells the story, right? The sources mentioned its Greek roots.
they do. It comes from nosocomion, that's Greek for hospital, and, well, phobos, which most people know means fear.
So quite literally fear of the hospital.
Spot on. And in this deep dive, we're going to, unpack that a bit. Look at maybe why someone precisely. And the sources also kind of hint at this underlying vulnerability, being sick, facing your own mortality maybe, potential pain. It all gets mixed up in that hospital setting.
So it's a mix of losing control and facing your own vulnerability.
Could be a big part of it for many people, yeah.
Right. Now, speaking of intense reactions,
hmm
we also found something about President Richard Nixon.
Yes, that came up in the sources. It suggested he might have had nosocomophobia. There's this specific story from 1974.
What happened?
Well, apparently he had a blood clot, but reportedly refused treatment because he was so afraid of hospitals.
Really? Refused treatment.
Yeah, there's even a quote attributed to him, something quite dramatic, like, if I go into the hospital, I'll never come out alive.
Wow. That's that's a really powerful statement. Did multiple sources mention that?
Uh-huh. Both UPI and Associated Press articles we looked at included that quote. It really highlights how intense this fear can become.
Absolutely. Intense enough to potentially refuse necessary medical care.
Mm.
That's serious.
It really is. Now, obviously, we can't diagnose someone retrospectively based on articles, but it's a stark example, isn't it?
Yeah.
It shows how this kind of phobia isn't just a simple dislike. It can genuinely override rational thinking, even when your health is on the line. It kind of fits into that category of specific phobias.
Specific phobias.
Yeah, where there's this persistent, outsized fear of a very particular thing or situation.
Yeah.
Our sources place nosocomophobia within that broader list.
Okay, that makes sense. So we have the definition, this idea about control loss, the Nixon example.
hmm
How does this all fit together? How does it relate to maybe more common anxieties people have?
Well, like I said, it's listed among other phobias, but I think it also taps into something maybe more widespread, general anxiety about health, about being ill, about medical settings.
So lots of people might feel uneasy in hospitals, even without a full phobia.
Exactly. That feeling of unease is pretty common, I'd say. The sources, while focusing on the phobia, sort of implicitly bring up these general worries too. Worries about procedures or just feeling unwell and dependent.
But there's a line, right, between general unease and actual nosocomophobia.
Oh, definitely. A true phobia is characterized by fear that's really disproportionate to the actual risk, and it significantly interferes with someone's life. It's not just dislike, it's avoidance and intense distress.
Got it. So nosocomophobia is like an extreme end of a spectrum of feelings people might have about hospitals and health.
That's a good way to put it. So, yeah, wrapping up. Nosocomophobia, it's this recognized intense fear. Seems tied to that very human need for control.
hmm
And we saw that even, major public figures have reportedly struggled with it.
So thinking about all that, it leads me to a question for you listening. If it's rooted partly on loss of control, what other kinds of underlying anxieties or maybe past experiences do you think might feed into a fear like nosocomophobia? What else could make someone react so strongly to a hospital?
That's a great question to mull over. Because thinking about those deeper layers, well, that's really what this deep dive is all about. Giving you the info from the sources and hopefully sparking some further thought.